my own company, we have an A to Z of a process, if you like. It's called the I Resolved process. And I Resolved is a mnemonic for going through, I'll go through it bit by bit. Gathering information, realize the problem you're actually facing, examine and analyze the issues on the table and the people involved in the game, what strategy and tactics we're going to employ, the method of opening dialogue, how to listen, understand, and influence the behavior of others, how to validate your assumptions on power and leverage, establish a proposal to close the deal, and then debrief. Now, this process is, as I said, it's an A to Z. Validate your assumptions on power and leverage, right? I'm writing a book right now called Never Trust Your Instincts, right? And it's a bit provocative, but what I mean by that is always validate your intuition, your instincts, because very often we find there's something else going on in the story, particularly in the world of negotiation, right? And you'll have experienced that many times. The main topic today is how to deal with difficult people, adversarial contacts. How do you deal with the problem people in your world? And it ranges from people who are just awkward or people who are absolutely horrible. And I've spent 35 years dealing with people on that spectrum. So we talk about the I Resolve definition of empathy. What is empathy? We hear people talking about walking in the shoes of others, right? You cannot walk in the shoes of others. It's really about being able to recognize and articulate the emotional state of other people and the context of that. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is, for us, it's about saying, you look sad, right? You look happy. You seem to be frustrated. Now, that would be normally what we would call an emotional label. You just label the emotion that you see. But for me, empathy is a lot more deep than that. It includes context, right? And the context is the because. You look frustrated because you cannot get food into the camp. You cannot get water through to the people who need it, right? That kind of thing. So empathy really is about recognize what's going on, but not excluding the context of what's going on, right? So it's a bit stronger than what you would normally recognize. Sympathy. Some of us think sympathy is there, right? Give people a hug. It's not. It's actually about sharing a feeling with someone else. You cry, I cry. You laugh, I laugh. And for me, I often share this experience with people about when I'm in the presence of my daughter, right? My daughter has an infectious laugh. And when she laughs, I laugh. And sometimes I don't even know what the joke is. I'm not even sure what's funny, but her emotion is infectious. So sympathy is when you're infected by the emotions of others. Many years in the law enforcement area as a hostage negotiator going to the edge of a bridge, I would feel sad when people were sad, or when they were lonely, I would often feel that. And of course, there's a fine line between becoming an absorber of people's emotions, because you have to be able to put maybe one foot in their shoes and not two, because if you become affected by their emotions too deeply, then you're not able to control your own. And compassion really is about offering support. That's the bit that we sometimes mistake a little bit for sympathy, or it's really when you put an arm around someone and say, how can we help you out of this difficult thing, right? So it's important that we understand the difference between empathy, sympathy, and compassion, because we're working out how the tools that we need to deal with those difficult people, right? So we, at the very least, must be able to understand us and how we connect to other people normally, right? So this is normal functioning behavior, how you function with normal, friendly human beings. There are three layers of empathy, right? Cognitive empathy. It helps us understand what people are thinking. Emotional empathy helps us understand what they're feeling, right? And it's slightly different. And not to mention compassionate, right? Helps us understand the challenges that they're facing. And you know that when you recognize and say these things out loud, you'll normally get a response from people. And when you say to someone, that seems to me that you're frustrated because of the volume of your work, and they respond by saying something like, that's right, you're right. Or when you get it, a good connection, and they say something like, right, it means that there's a connection there, right? And we want to recreate your ability to connect with people. That engrossed transformational moment when someone says, he just gets me, she just gets me, right? So the hostage negotiators have learned to reverse engineer that progress and that process rather from A to Z and say, over a period of time, on the average siege in the UK runs between 2 and 6 hours. But most good negotiators can establish that relationship in under 1 hour, right? And then we start to build the picture. So it's understanding the journey and how you do that with a level of authenticity. Of course, you do it anyway, right? I'm explaining something that you do automatically. But I want you to think about it a little bit differently because I don't want it just to happen. I want you to make it happen, right? If you're not making it happen, it's just happening by chance. But in the world of negotiation, we have to create it and then make it happen so that we can build sustainable relationships, sustainable partnerships. So right now, you should be thinking about the relationships that you have that are really strong, and then compare that to the relationships that you have that are not so strong, and try and understand what's the difference. What did I do different with that person that I did to that person to create that strong connection?
Mm.
Context, we often look at things through our own prism, right? Context is really where you set the scene for an event. And we sometimes say, things like we can see the facial expressions on someone's face and we say, you look sad. But we eliminate the context of that. It might well be that they're sad face, but they're actually lonely because they're sitting alone in a room, or they're maybe just isolating themselves. They're not communicating with people. They don't respond by text. But we just ignore these things because we just look at it through our prism and don't recognize the depth of what's going on. So I want you to think about the context that you apply to something. Are you applying the context from your prism or from their prism? And when you look at it through your prism, of course, you will be affected by your own either unconscious or deliberate biases, right? So it's really about self-awareness. And the biggest thing about self-awareness, and we sometimes refer to that as emotional intelligence, well, being aware of your own emotions is only one part of the equation. It's the impact that you have on other people that really matter, right? So emotionally intelligent people think it's okay to say, yeah, my self-awareness is high. I'm really aware that I can be frustrated. But the better ones understand the impact that they have on other people, right? Understand that you cause people to perhaps be quiet, perhaps you make people react, whatever the trigger is to other people. So for you in the humanitarian world, when people are obnoxious or they're arrogant or aggressive, what is the impact that they have on you? Or what is the impact that you have on them? An example that I have in terms of my own personal awareness, especially when I was the head of the firearms team, I like to think that I was an easygoing, likable, friendly guy. But in terms of the impact I had on other people, sometimes I would walk into a room and people were terrified of my presence without knowing me. And I recognized that maybe it was my persona, my rank, my role that was having an impact on them. So I had to work extra hard to get them to the place where they felt relaxed. So that's the big difference about my context and their context. No point me just saying I'm friendly if they don't feel it, right? Perception, your perception versus their perception. And we learned in the world of hostage negotiation that people often form a perception of things. And I'll come to that later on, but it's not the same as having a perspective on things. People's perception is built based on what their senses tell them is true. Your truth, my truth. So, as an example, if I have a perception of an event, let's just say I saw something unfold, but you saw something completely different, you'll never change my perception, right? You can change my perspective over time, my point of view, but you cannot change my perception. You know, we understand from psychology the principle of resistance that the more you try to convince someone that their opinion, their worldview is wrong, the deeper their resolve becomes, right? We make them dig in. So we could never try to change someone's perception of an event or a situation. We focus on what we normally do is the perspective. And we make them see different perspectives, but we can only do that when we get to the point of perspective where we understand the perspective of each other, right? You see my point of view and I see your point of view. And we've learned in the world of negotiation that people will never see your point of view unless they feel heard and understood, right? Heard and understood. They're not open to your solutions until they feel heard and understood. You know the phrase, unexpressed feelings never die? Well, that's about if they don't get to express their feelings, their context, their view of the world, they'll never be open to yours. It just becomes an argument, right? It becomes conflict. You think A and I think B. You think A and I think B. And all that happens there is the conflict escalates. The difference of opinion becomes polarized. So we learn, shut up and listen. That's why the listening skills of negotiation is so important, that we shut up from our perspective. And we also learn the benefit that eventually, when I do convey my perspective, I can frame it in a way that will be palatable to them. I can frame it in a way that's good for them. But when I do it before they feel heard and understood, I'm literally and metaphorically wasting my breath.